Hello everybody and welcome to my latest video. Today I'm going to tell you about a really important species of moth that I've been wanting to give you information about for a long time. Resting here on this tree trunk is a female of the Lymantria dispar, aka the gypsy moth, and on her side we can see a smaller brown moth which is a male of the same species. So here we have a white female and a small brown male, and they are currently in the act of copulation, which basically means that they are pairing or in the act of fertilization. And what's interesting to note is how immediately we recognize the massive differences between males and females. Now, the females of the gypsy moth are very big and have white wings with black markings, and the males, they are very small, they are brown, and they have very big antennae. Now, the reason for this is because the females of Lymantria dispar, they do not move much. When they hatch from their cocoons, they usually remain in the area of their old pupa shell. Most of them barely move more than 30 centimeters in their entire life. They just sit there for days after day, waiting for a male to arrive. That means that males do the majority of all the work in regards to flying. Now, what's interesting is many sources online report the females of the Lymantria dispar to be flightless because they have underdeveloped flight muscles, which means that in their wings they do not have the muscles that they need to fly. This is only partially true because research has shown that some populations of the Lymantria dispar have females that can fly. In fact, they can fly quite well. But some populations, mainly in Europe, have females with reduced muscles in her wing that render her unable to fly. Now, this is something to think about. This means that the ability for a gypsy moth to fly is a heritable ability and heritable trait. So if you think about it, that means there are many populations of the gypsy moth that have evolved differently. And you can see this all over the world. For example, the subspecies in Japan, the Lymantria dispar asiatica, is much bigger, and the females fly very large distances, while in Europe, many populations, the female only sit there waiting for a male and then die. What's also interesting is females of Lymantria dispar, when they have been fertilized, lay very large egg cases, which is a very large mass of eggs close together. And when they are finished laying their eggs, they cover them with their abdomen because they have special hairs on their abdomen, and they use these hairs to protect their eggs. And it forms a big protective casing over their eggs. Now, the gypsy moth can be found in Asia and in many parts of Europe. Unfortunately, since recently, the moth has escaped in America, where it has proven to be quite a destructive invasive species. This is because the gypsy moth is so polyphagous, it is rather a generalist that can feed on over 100 types of plants. But I think in reality it can probably eat over 500 kinds of host plants. And this is because the caterpillars, well, they are so open-minded, they are willing to feed on almost any type of plant. Mainly the deciduous trees and shrubs, like oak is by far their favorite, but also willows, cherries, fruit trees, and you name it, and they will eat it. In America, is regarded as a very destructive forest pest because their populations can get so out of control that they defoliate entire native forests, which causes some irreparable damage. In Europe, the same can happen, but it is much more rare. Because in Europe, these moths have their own native predators and parasites that keep their populations under control. And even if their populations are not under control and they manage to defoliate trees, then well, who cares? They are native here, it's part of our ecosystem. So I really wouldn't label them pests in that regard, only outside of their native range. The caterpillars are quite hairy and may cause rashes with skin contact if you are very sensitive to this, although they are not known to be very toxic or dangerous in any other way. So I told you about the females who barely move in their life and how it differs per population if they can fly or not. Some are just sitting ducks. I have yet to tell you about the males who are day active, and that's right, they fly during the day. The males can be commonly seen flying in a zigzag pattern, trying to pick up the female's pheromones, and when he locates her, well, which often happens quickly, this happens, a pairing. They usually have one generation a year. The eggs overwinter, they wait for next spring to hatch. But what's interesting is, in some very rare cases, the eggs laid by the gypsy moth will hatch the very same year that they are laid. However, this is very rare. And usually, when this happens, the caterpillars die because they are in no way can they survive the winter. So why do the eggs sometimes hatch anyways? Well, maybe it could be a survival mechanism. That means that if the conditions or local climate would allow a second generation, then it would happen, because it's enabled in their biology for a second generation to happen, because in very rare cases the eggs of the same generation hatch the very same year instead of overwintering. It means if they were somehow, someday, able to conquer tropical climates, it may shift into a continuously brooded species, which would be terrible in its own regard, but okay, it's also interesting to think about. So I've told you about males, females, caterpillars, and how they can eat nearly any kind of tree and shrub because they are so polyphagous. If you watch on my YouTube channel, you can see how I rear them. I live in Europe, by the way, so don't worry, they are native to my area. I have yet to see if this is a female of the flying or the non-flying type. Well, I guess I went through all the important basics here, and I'll leave you out there to figure out the rest. Thank you for watching my video about the gypsy moth. And until next time, please like and subscribe.